Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today I want to focus on interest rates and the latest news from the Fed regarding cutting those rates, but most importantly, how that will affect the trucking industry. We often look at this industry from the standpoint of number of trucks versus number of loads, but man, is it much bigger than that. So, how do interest rates affect trucking? And more importantly, what does this piece of news mean for the near future of the trucking industry? So, let's chat about it. Ready? Let's go. Now, regardless of whether you're in trucking or not, you're probably watching those interest rates either with one eye, two eyes, or through a microscope. And we all know that the general economic situation can affect the trucking industry both directly and indirectly, including those interest rates. So, according to Landline, and I quote, the Federal Reserve decided not to touch interest rates and it indicated just one cut this year, a shift from what analysts predicted at the beginning of the year, which included hopes of freight pushing through a down cycle in the second half of 2024. On Wednesday, June 12th, the Federal Reserve announced that it will keep interest rates unchanged between 5 and 5.25%. Additionally, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell suggested there may only be one interest rate cut this year, which may not come until fall. The Fed's latest update on interest rates deviates from its projections at the end of last year. Last December, the Federal Reserve officials predicted 3 cuts in 2024. So why is this such an important piece of news? Well, because it will affect trucking both directly and indirectly. So first, let's start with the direct influences. The cost of borrowing money will depend on the interest rates as well as what the Fed decides to do. So if you're in a position where you want to either renew your fleet or add equipment to your existing fleet, that means that you are not in the best of situations at the moment. Since the Fed is planning to keep interest rates unchanged at about 5%, that means that the interest rates on those financed trucks are still high. Now, I know some of you will say, but 5% is not such a horrific interest rate to pay on a financed truck, and that is true, but it's not that simple, unfortunately. In the best case scenario, and I'm going to use banks as an example here, if you are a low-risk customer, the bank will set a prime rate, which is usually about 3% higher than what the Fed sets as the interest rate. That means that in the absolute best case scenario, you're looking at around 8 to 9% interest rates. But today, especially in trucking, which is currently considered a high-risk industry, those interest rates are usually higher. Now, even more important than those direct influences are those indirect influences on the trucking industry. Recently, I had a conversation with my business partner who told me, listen, it's the season for flatbeds. Why is it so difficult right now? And my answer to him was the fact that in part it's interest rates and the fact that they are not being cut. So interest rates will affect consumer spending and sentiment actually, because in the US, most of us, we kind of learned to survive on debt. Most folks have car loans, mortgages, or some finance larger purchases that they can't pay in full right on the spot. So what does that mean for us? Well, for example, using flatbeds. According to census.gov, privately owned housing units authorized by building permits in April were at a seasonally adjusted annual rate of $1,440,000, which is 3% below the March rate and 2% below April of 2023. This means that people are getting less permits to build, which results in less construction. Why? Well, in part, the reason is because the housing market is full of inventory. Actually, it's almost 14% more inventory right now than the same time in 2023. It is really difficult to sell homes right now because consumers face those outrageous interest rates when trying to take out a mortgage. So, less construction usually translates to less volumes for flatbeds. But it's not just flatbeds that are affected, of course. Again, for those consumers who choose to get a new car or they choose to get a new home or finance any large purchase, the interest rates are currently pretty high and they're not getting cut. And that means that these consumers have less to spend on things that they don't really need. Now, pair that together with the fact that the Consumer Price Index, which shows us the price of a basket of goods, it's also high. So guess what happens? These people just don't have as much discretionary income. In other words, interest rates will affect volumes in trucking, and volumes will affect rates when paired with capacity. Now, someone is going to ask, but wait, isn't trucking getting a little bit better? The data is showing the rejection rates are up. Everything seems to be going in the right direction. And yes, that is true. There is an uptick right now, but my opinion is that it is completely related to seasonality. This means that the foundation of the trucking industry is still facing turmoil like many other industries. And this seasonal uptick that we are seeing is just kind of a temporary blindfold or band-aid. Now, according to Landline, at the beginning of the year, many analysts predicted that the current freight recession may begin to lift in the second half of 2024. A lot of that speculation was under the backdrop of inflation easing at a quicker rate. In the first quarter of 2024, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association's foundation told Landline that interest rate cuts could be key to higher volume later in the year. Now, the foundation pointed out that manufacturing generates about 60% of all for-hire freight. Manufacturing is also in a recession. Interest rates, which are at a 23-year high, have led investors to scale back spending. Manufacturing likely would increase with a decrease in interest rates, thereby increasing for-hire freight volume. Now, the foundation research analyst Andrew King said that the latest interest rate news could further delay the next upcycle for freight, which is now not expected until the second quarter of 2025. With freight rates already bottoming out, a lack of interest rate cuts won't send them further down. So yeah, sadly, we have that piece of news to live with this weekend. And again, we have to remember that trucking is not as simple as looking at supply and demand, right? Because both supply and demand are affected by much bigger and much broader things than our small industry. And yes, it is small compared to the things that affect it. And again, this leads me to believe that the current uptick that we are seeing is just a band-aid, not a cure. It's just a temporary seasonal uptick. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching today and joining me on a Saturday. I hope you have an awesome weekend and a great start to your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.